Today on Nova Legends podcast, I have Tom McMillen, University of Maryland great, former congressman, a guy I really look up to when I was a kid watching the Maryland Terrapins and later on the Bullets. Tom, thanks a lot for doing this.
Well, I'm delighted to be here with you, Julian. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome. So let me give you broad sketches of your career. It's pretty extraordinary. You're from a small town, Mansfield, Pennsylvania, which couldn't have been a hotbed of basketball talent at the time. Son of a doctor, landed on the cover of Sports Illustrated in high school, which I'm sure doesn't happen every day. Ended up going to the University of Maryland. Big recruiting war between Lefty and Dean Smith and UNC, and also former Mansfield State coach Bill Gibson. Had a great career at Maryland. You were there for some of the really the formidable years that made the ACC what it is today. The battles with NC State. That was interrupted briefly by the famous 1972 Olympics. That was the Olympics, of course, where unfortunately the hostages were taken and the Palestinian gunmen actually killed some of the Israeli Olympians. But it was also the Olympics when we finally lost the gold medal in a very controversial play, which you were involved in. But anyway, went to Oxford, which not too many future NBA players find time to do. Played in the Italian league, which is interesting, I'm sure, at the time. Then had I think a 10-year NBA career, very consistent career with the Braves, the Atlanta Hawks, the Baltimore Bullets. Played for some iconic coaches, Red Holtzman, Hubie Brown. So just had a great career. Then afterwards, I became a congressman, 3 terms of PG County, three-term congressman. Wrote a book called Out of Bounds while he was in Congress about the corruption that was in sports that probably still is. And then you've been appointed to presidential commissions. You've been in the University of Maryland Board of Regents. I think you're back on right now. And for the last, I think, 8 years, you've been working, we used to call it 1AA colleges with the athletic directors representing their interests. Now I think it's called Lead1, and we call the organization that you represent college. What do we call that? We call it college bowl, football bowl subdivision. So yeah. So Tom, did I get most of that correct?
You covered a lot. It's hard to quibble with any of that. So
yeah, and you still got the beautiful, iconic gray hair that love to have. So
it used to be premature, but no longer.
Yeah, now it's right on time.
It is.
Yeah. So look, I think I want to start with your book, Out of Bounds, because there's been a lot of changes to college sports recently, and you're still involved. Would you write the same book today? That you wrote in 1992 with NIL, with ways which college students now can make money? Have things gotten better, or is it the same as it's always been?
It would be very similar. There might be another 0 on the end of all the numbers that I quoted in my book. When a coach is making $1 million, just starting to make $1 million, it would be 10 million today. But a lot of the themes are part of the book. The real battle in college sports over really 100 years has been between the academics and commercialism of college sports. And when commercialism prevails, you see really money ruling the day. When academics prevail, graduation rates, kids getting degrees, the 500,000 kids that go through college sports today are moving on to productive lives because they had a chance to go to college. I mean, it's always the ebb and flow between those two. My book really discussed that. So the themes are relevant even today. I think what's changed is that one side of the equation, which is management, has really done so well with, as I said, millions and millions of salaries and dollars salaries. And the athlete side is saying, how about us? Why can't we bargain for this? And it's created a lot of pressures because you can't forget that these are institutions of higher learning. And I mean, do you want at the end of the day to turn them into mirror images of the NFL and the NBA? That's the question. But the chickens were half out of the coop, on one side, and now the rest of the chickens want to get out too. So it's very complicated. It's hard to put the genie, sort of, to use a bunch of expressions, back in the bottle. But we've got to get back to what are college sports about, which is really taking a kid and giving them a college education, and also allowing them the chance to play college sports. I mean, that model is unique in the world, and it has to be preserved.
Yeah. Well, there's been some kind of interesting stories where athletes are going back to college because of NIL. Like, for example, Armando Bacot, the center for North Carolina,
Right.
he's going back yet again because he's making good money. Some of the women who just played in the NCAA championship games, they're going back because they're making more money in college than they'd make in the WNBA, or conceivably they could. Are those good stories? Are those happy stories? I know it probably doesn't help the former 1AA schools, the athletes there, very much.
Yes, absolutely. Those are really, really positive stories, because, I do think you should use the marketplace to keep kids in school. And if they can earn more money while they're in school, so be it. Let them get an education. That is a lifetime gift. And so I am all in favor of that development. That's really positive. It is one way. One of the great things about the Final Four this year was a lot of those teams have been together for a couple of years. It wasn't kind of stocked full of one and dones. Those kids were actually getting degrees. Some had already been pursuing graduate degrees. That is positive. That's an affirmation of the college model.
Yeah. Well, let's go back and talk a little bit about how you got started. So, I've talked to many basketball players from Pennsylvania, and the first thing they always tell me is that Pennsylvania wasn't very good for basketball. It's wrestling, it's football, like Barry Parkhill, Wally Walker, my high school coach, Bob McKeag, who you played against when he was at UVA. I did talk to Gus Gerard, but I think Pittsburgh was a little bit stronger than the rest of the state. But they always said that it wasn't very strong in basketball, but yet I've talked to so many pro players that are from Pennsylvania. So what about you? How did a guy from Mansfield, Pennsylvania end up on Sports Illustrated?
Well, I wouldn't say it's Indiana quality, but I think Pennsylvania's pretty good, actually. Look, Walt Chamberlain was one of our Pennsylvania stars. We've had some great athletes come out of Pennsylvania. Well, what happened was my brother Jay was ahead of me, 6 years ahead of me, and he was really a very good all-state Pennsylvania player, and 6'7", great shooter. And so when he went to Maryland and he generated a lot of attention, his kid brother got a lot of that focus, and that's what happened to me. By me going to the games, watching my brother, everybody found out about me. I went to camps. So really the notability that I got was a result of literally my brother paving the way ahead of me, but also the fact that, I was going to a lot of camps. So one thing leads to another. People begin to see you, and you become sort of a national story. And that's really what happened.
Yeah. Did you guys play a lot of basketball, pick up basketball at the local college? I mean, you had to get a lot of experience to get to the level you got to.
That was a very interesting point that you make, because if Mansfield, Pennsylvania didn't have a college town, it wasn't a college town, I would be hard pressed to get competition to play against. But I used to go up and play against college players every day when I was training and working out. And that really made a difference. And, if I didn't grow up in a college town, I don't think I would have had that opportunity. So a big factor in my development.
Yeah. Were your parents athletes?
My father was a basketball player, but he had polio when he was pretty young. I mean, he could walk and everything, but it curtailed his career. His brother was a very good basketball player, so there was some athleticism in the family. My mother's family was some of them were very big. On both sides, we had some uncles that were 6'4", 6'5". So we had some height built in, and a real love of basketball by my father. That was just one of his passions.
Yeah. Who was your high school coach? And was Mansfield? Did you guys have a decent team?
We did. We won the state championship, and my high school coach was Rich Miller, who happened to be my chemistry teacher. He also imbued in me really a love for chemistry. I was a chemistry major at Maryland, of all things. That's a very tough major to focus on, and so he was my coach and my chemistry teacher, and he had actually played high school basketball at Mansfield. Went away and coached a few places, then came back to coach me when I was in school.
Did you get to know Bill Gibson? So Bill Gibson is a guy that I didn't know much about him because I was too young to remember the days before Terry Holland. But when I've talked to Wally Walker and Barry Parkhill, they say he had a great personality, just a wonderful guy, and he was a really good recruiter. He was able to get guys in Pennsylvania to come to UVA, even though the record wasn't great. Did you get to know him at all, Bill Gibson?
Oh, extremely well. He coached in Mansfield when I was probably in elementary school, and then he left. But my mother was very close to him. My mother had been on the board of trustees at Mansfield University for 25 years, so she knew him. I mean, they played bridge together. He was a very engaging guy. I remember the night I had to make a decision where to go to college. I literally, it was the day before schools, the registration for classes ended in all these schools. He's sitting in my house playing bridge with my parents. I try to tell my mother, you got to get him out of here. I'm packing for school, not knowing what college I'm going to. Dean Smith was calling me from Europe. Lefty was wondering where I was. Gibson's in my living room playing cards with my family. Finally, my brother showed up from medical school. He drove all the way up there, and I ended up deciding to go to Maryland at the last minute. But Bill had a plane right down the road. He was going to take me to UVA. So, it was kind of sad that I had, basically turn him down as well as turning Dean Smith. I could only go to one school, but I respected them both immensely.
Yeah. Well, there's a wonderful documentary on the ACC tournament, and you're featured in it, and you tell great stories. But Tom Burleson, your future NBA teammate and your fellow Olympian, and bitter rival in college, he kind of threw someone under the bus for him going to NC State and not UNC. Something about a credit card that you were using for phone calls, and that was the reason why he decided to go to NC State. Was that a true story he was telling?
I saw Tom recently. We had the 50th anniversary, even though it's not 50 yet, of our great ACC game, but it was at the tournament, and he was there, and we were talking about it. And I asked him about how long he had really known he was going to go to state, and he had really pretty much decided to go to state from the very beginning. It was partly the agricultural strength of North Carolina State. He was very interested in that. His career, he was a supervisor. He's very much into agriculture. So we were talking at the time. I don't remember the credit card thing. That might have been true, but it was very innocuous. But I doubt that's the reason why he went to state. I think he was pretty well heading there beforehand. We had talked about playing together. We never did. We were competitors. We ended up playing together at the Atlanta Hawks, ironically, but never in college. I keep in touch with Tom. He's a great guy, and it was nice to see all of them: David Thompson, Monty Tao, and Burleson. But I think he was pretty much committed to state. It was a great decision for him because not only Tom, but David Thompson and Monty Tao. That was a great trio.
Yeah. Well, Coach Drizel Lefty said on the documentary that your father didn't care much for Dean Smith or really wanted you to go to Maryland. And I think that had something to do with your brother had played at Maryland. Maybe that biased him towards Maryland. Was that a true story as well?
It wasn't. I don't think my dad didn't like Dean. It was that he really wanted me to go to Maryland. And there were reasons for that. He loved watching me play. He just felt if I was at Carolina, it would be hard for him to see me play. Ironically, I changed my mind to go to Maryland. I had originally committed to Carolina verbally, but I went to Maryland because my father that summer before I had to go to school got sick, and I know how important it was for him to see me play. So I ended up saying I was going to go to Maryland. My father saw all my home games. He'd come down, he'd drive down with his friends from Pennsylvania. It was a 4 or 5 hour drive, and he'd drive back sometimes that the same night and practice dentistry. Well, he died my senior year. He wasn't well, but he did that very difficult schedule. So in some respects, I don't think there was any animosity to Dean or any of that. I think it was just he wanted to see me play. That was really meaningful to him. And at the end of the day, that's what drove my decision above all else. And I think Dean understood that. Bill Gibson understood that. Going to Maryland turned out pretty well. So
yeah, it did. Well, how did you perceive the ACC back then? This is before ESPN, of course, and there might be one college game on TV on a Saturday, so we didn't really know. Dean Smith had just started out. The ACC didn't have the gravitas, of course, that it has now, or all the champions that it's had. So how did you view the ACC at the time?
Well, I remember my brother had played there, and Duke was very good at the time. Duke had, Marin, Verga, Jeff Mullins, all those, Art Heyman. They had all those great players, and Duke was sort of the star of the ACC. And then South Carolina was very good until they left, and so I just saw the ACC as a great basketball conference. It was never much, even though Maryland had some success in football across the ACC. It wasn't that big a football conference. It was a basketball conference. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find a better basketball conference in the country at the time. Even though Dean had been at Carolina, he had been there a while, but he had not risen to the level that he eventually rose to. The Big East was a great conference for basketball, but ACC was darn good, and it was a great conference to play in.
Yeah, no doubt. So what was it like? What was 1970 Washington, D.C. like? I mean, you had a great political career. So obviously you became interested in politics at some point. But what were the politics like being in the D.C. area in 1970? Is that something that you thought much about at the time?
Well, one of the reasons why I went to Maryland, when I was 17 years old, I think it was in February of my senior year, the White House called and asked me to be a presidential appointee on the President's Council on Physical Fitness. And that was headed by the astronaut James Lovell. Nixon appointed me. I was the youngest presidential appointee ever. I still think to this day, I'm the youngest presidential appointee ever. And it was a pretty heady thing to think that, well, you're appointed to a presidential commission. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to go to Maryland was that, I'd be there. I could go to meetings. I could be part of it. And because we'd meet like 4 times a year. And, but that was a big thrill for me to be on a presidential commission when I was in college. So in the 70s, that was very tumultuous times. There were riots on campus. There were tear gas. I was not very much engaged in any of that because I was worried about school. I was a chemistry major. That was enormously difficult. And I was just worrying about getting good grades and getting through school and being a good basketball player. And so I wasn't that involved, although I would end up going to the White House and meeting President Nixon and all that. It actually hurt me in a way because I remember the 1B I got ironically, I got my freshman year was in the class of speech. And the teacher was very, very, very prototypical protest kind of anti-Vietnam. And I think because there was a picture of me with Richard Nixon, I think on the front page of the Washington Post. And I think that did not help me score points in that class. But overall, I kind of stayed out of all that. I know that my sophomore year, the administration, the Nixon re-elect campaign really recruited me hard, Martha Mitchell and all that, but I stayed out of it. I used the Olympics as my excuse. And so I kept my head down. And then I worked in the Senate my junior year, which was a great job. I really enjoyed that very much. And that sort of crystallized my interest in politics.
Yeah. Well, did it seem like times were changing quickly? Like when you arrived at College Park, there wasn't a black player at UVA yet. I went to UVA, and Al Drummond, I think, showed up the year after, maybe the year after that. And so times are going to change really quickly in the ACC and also college basketball and also the country. Did it occur to you that times were changing that quickly?
Well, ironically, I grew up in a small town and there weren't any African communities around. So kind of a sterile environment. Then I come to Maryland. It's quite integrated. Our team, we had Jap Trimble, Len Elmore. We had two great high school players. And so you became very accustomed to that. Maryland, the University of Maryland was much more integrated than any other ACC school. And so it was just something that was more acceptable back then. I was used to it because I had played in national tournaments and I'd gone to camp. So I had been playing in sort of biracial environments my whole life, even though I didn't grow up in one. So it was very comfortable for me to go to Maryland. I can't imagine what it would have been like at Carolina or Virginia, but it was just much slower than Maryland. Maryland was much more progressive.
Yeah. What'd you think about the freshman eligibility? Like John Lucas, your tremendous teammate a few years later, was able to hit the ground running and play, but you had to sit out and really focus. I mean, for you, you're a superior student. It's probably not the worst thing in the world for a person like you. But what'd you think about having to sit out and focus on your studies the first year?
Well, at the time, I thought it was very helpful because we only played 16 games. We were undefeated. It really gave me a chance to get, 16 games a season, not much. It really gave me a chance to get my feet on the ground in school. In retrospect, I wish I could have played because, all the records at Maryland, I still have the scoring record average for Maryland, but I don't have the scoring point record because I didn't play. Well, three things. I didn't play my freshman year. We didn't have a 3-point shot. And today they play about 5 more games a regular season than we did. So, in some respects, I would have loved to be more of this modern era where you have, it's part of the comparison of history. Our records are so different than today's records because of all those factors.
Do you think you would have shot a lot of 3-pointers today? I mean, you were great. You had a great mid-range game, but there was no incentive to shoot 21-footers because they counted the same as a 12-footer.
No, I think that would have changed. I think I would have averaged maybe another point a game. So maybe instead of 21, maybe 22, but it would have made a difference. And plus you grow up shooting threes. We didn't grow up shooting threes. I had a good jump shot. My brother was a very good jump shooter. But we didn't grow up just taking that extra step out, and it would have made a difference.
Yeah. Well, you did hit the ground running when you started playing your sophomore year. You guys had an early, huge win against St. John's, and I guess they were rated 5 in the country. They had Mel Davis and Bill Schaefer. Do you recall that game? It was like your first big win as a Maryland player.
Sort of, there's been a lot of games, but I do remember. Yes.
Yeah. And then
I do remember though. We went down to Charlottesville. And Barry Parkhill really gave us a wake-up call. He put on a clinic on us, and that was our first real recognition. Wow, this is going to be a little tougher than we thought it was.
Yeah. Well. Then you end up you get to the ACC final and you lose to UNC. Unfortunately, at the time, only one team from the ACC went to the NCAA tournament, but you did get to go to the NIT and you won the NIT. You beat Frank Layden's Niagara team. Was the NIT meaningful back then, since there was only 16 teams in the NCAA?
Right, there were 25 in the NCAA, 16 in the NIT, far fewer than it is today with 68 teams. The NIT was actually a pretty big deal, and we whizzed right through it. I don't think we even had a game, anything that was even competitive. St. Joe's and Niagara and all those, Jacksonville. I know that we didn't have much of a game, so it was significant. They don't give credit to the NIT back then, but the NIT was a very big tournament. There were teams in the NIT that couldn't go on to the NCAA because the rules were so limiting. When Maryland won its national title, they were a great team, but they lost the ACC title and tournament. In our era, that would have ended their season. Here they go on to win a national title. So there were lots of second chances today that we didn't have.
Yeah, I think statistically, winning your conference tournament doesn't make you any more likely to win the national tournament. As a matter of fact, sometimes you play too many games. So, but anyway, that summer was a very important summer in American history. But for you, it had to be a formative chapter in your career. Tell us a little bit about the Munich games. I mean, obviously, in retrospect, was it a surprise that the games weren't canceled? After the terrorist attack, they went through and they were able to have, the Olympic Games. Take us back and tell us a little bit about that summer.
Well, 1972, I was a member of that Olympic team and going to Munich, this beautiful city of Munich, where they were going to have this Olympics to try to really take a new leaf on the new Germany, kind of away from the post-World War Germany and sort of the new Germany of the future. And the Olympic Village was fabulous. And we were a team that were very young. We had trained very hard. And we got over there. We were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, where, for instance, all the other teams were 25, 26, 27, way into their 30s. They were literally, most were pros because they're either their government or clubs paid them. And, again, when the Munich attack occurred, the terrorists violated the village, I was of the view that they should have canceled the games. At that moment, today, I think that would have been a mistake because it would have opened the Olympics up for terrorist after terrorist attack if they felt they could cancel the Olympics. And I remember, I think they spent about $1 million on security for Munich. Today, they spend billions. It changed the whole Olympic movement. But 5 days later, after we had that terrible event on really the start of modern terrorism, we had to play this basketball game at midnight against the Soviet Union. And the American team had never lost since 1936 when basketball was introduced. And we knew it was going to be a tough game because the Soviets were pros. And we came from behind and we ended up winning the game with 2 free throws at the end. And then that's when the comedy of errors started. The officials kept resetting the clock and giving the Soviets another chance. On the third time, they finally prevailed and scored. And we were kind of in shock and amazement. And we refused the next day to accept the silver medals. To this day, we've not accepted those silver medals because we rightfully won the game. The officials who came in and forced the clock to be reset were outside their authority. They never should have been able to do it. It was just a travesty of history. Here we go through, but we just had the 50th anniversary of that game. 2 of our teammates had passed, and so it's one of those things that will always be in the history books.
Yeah. Did you guys have a bond, the players on that team that, unfortunately lost? I think it was Tom Henderson, I believe, was on the team. And of course, Tom Burleson, a lot of players you played with and against in the NBA. Did you guys have a bond because you had that experience, not only the terrorist attack, but the kind of very questionable decisions by the officials late in that game?
Yes, I mean, we've kept up. The last anniversary we had, the last real celebration was not celebration, but get together was in the 40th anniversary. We didn't have one this year, but it's been a bond. It's we refuse to accept those silver medals. I think it's worthy of a debate. I mean, in my view, that's exactly what the International Olympic Committee wants. They want to bury those medals because they want to forget that horrible refereeing and horrible officiating that took place. My fear of the medals sitting in Luzerne, Switzerland, is that we're all gone. That story is going to end. I tried to get the Olympic International Committee to move those to an American museum, the Smithsonian or the Naismith Museum, and they refused to do it. And I can understand why. They don't want any more attention to that travesty than has been happening. In the Soviet Union, this is one of their greatest moments. They put out a film on this game. It was their top grossing film of all time. It's a moment of celebration in the Soviet Union. But here, I mean, we kind of sort of forget it. We move on. I think Ukraine has brought it back into the framework a little bit because people realize that there was a Cold War then. There's a cold, hot war now. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of connections between 50 years ago.
Yeah. And I bet you, I wonder if any of those players were on the Russian team Soviet team were Ukrainian, probably, probably so. So how did that experience, affect your basketball? I mean, playing against pros, Russian pros, and you played other teams during the Olympics. And you came back and you had a tremendous junior and senior year. Did that help you improve your game?
Well, I think so. Whenever you're playing that kind of competition and against great players, it has to help your game. It was a very surreal experience. You go over to the Olympics thinking this is the most idealistic place in the world, that sports is a very positive thing, and then ends up with all kinds of negativity on it. So it was very sobering and surreal.
Yeah. You're back in College Park now in Maryland. We didn't talk about Lefty very much, but you had described Lefty in the documentary as an encyclopedia salesman, and that wasn't really your opinion. He actually had been one when he was, I guess, before he took a job in coaching. Maybe when he started coaching, he was selling encyclopedias. But anyway, what are your thoughts about Lefty? I mean, obviously, we know a lot about him because he had a larger than life personality. But what was it like to actually play for him?
I think Lefty is larger than life. He's a very decent person. He could be so competitive. He could be ruthless, but at the end of the day, he had a really human side to him. I saw that when Dean Smith was sick, and Lefty, although they fought like cats and dogs, he was very close to Dean at the end. Lefty has a very human side. He's a competitor. His players love him. He was innovative. He always thought of different ways of doing things. You have to give him a lot of credit. He was, if the Lenny Bias situation didn't occur at Maryland, I mean, his career he would have been in the pantheon of college coaches. He's still in the Hall of Fame, but I think that was really a detour for him. He had to go to smaller schools after that, but he still won. He won everywhere he went, whether it's James Madison or Georgia State or you name it. He won everywhere that he coached, and his career is quite remarkable. He's really a legend, still going strong at 91, and I think the world of it. And so did my father and my mother.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you guys, Lefty, and you guys did you guys brought big time basketball to Washington D.C. That was before the Bullets moved here, and I think in 74, 73 the Bullets moved here. But University of Maryland and Lefty had called you guys the UCLA of the East, and you guys had this huge rivalry with NC State. But at Cole Fieldhouse, you would have Supreme Court justices, you'd have dignitaries. It was a big deal. University of Maryland basketball. What about those moments when you're playing on that stage?
It was a remarkable place to play. Cole Fieldhouse was electric. And to your point, I remember after the games, we had Supreme Court justices come in the locker room. I know Whizzer White came in, and we had senators come in, and it was quite remarkable because, it was sort of the college sports place to be in Washington. And you were right that college sports had not developed in Washington. Lefty was the pioneer and made it. When my brother played at Maryland, Cole Fieldhouse was the kids went in there for a study hall, so quiet during the games. When Lefty was there, it was a madhouse and packed to the gills, and remarkable how he became iconic in Washington, like Vince Lombardi and Sam Musial or George Allen. He really became iconic.
Yeah. Well, two of the greatest games in ACC history, maybe even college basketball history, are two of your losses.
I meant Ted Williams. I said Stan Musial, but I meant Ted Williams. Sorry, but I'm thinking of
Teddy Ballgame.
Athlete.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Baseball, right? Or Teddy Ballgame. I forgot what we call him. But let's get to the NC State rivalry. You guys played them on Super Bowl Sunday during the regular season, and that was a huge deal. I believe there was 25,000 people at Cole Fieldhouse, and then you ended up playing them your last college game. I'm sure it's probably a memory that's still with you when you guys lost in overtime. Talk a little bit about the NC State rivalry and against your buddy Tom Burleson.
Well, they had a very special team. They obviously had a great a center. Back then, you had to have a great point guard, a great center, and a great forward. They had all that. Well, so did we. I mean, we had Lenny, myself, and John Lucas. So it was an incredibly close matchup. Any one of those games could have gone the other way. And David Thompson was really, he was one of the greatest college players I've ever seen. And there's no question about it. He was Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan. He could jump. He could literally touch the top of the backboard. And so it was a great rivalry. We came up short, but the games were epic. The games were epic.
Yeah. Well, you had a player on your team that ended up being the first player picked in the draft in 1976 named John Lucas. And he was a guy that I was a guard, and I tried to play like Lucas. He had a very unique way of playing. He was all left, never used his right hand.
I know.
He would vary his speeds when he'd run. He'd run full speed, and he would slow down, and he would always try to keep his opponent off balance. What was it like to play with John Lucas?
It was terrific, because John would break out on a fast break, and I would trail, and he'd throw the ball back, and we ended up playing well together. Unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of time. I wish John was our class. It would have been more interesting to have played with him for my whole career, but he was a talent. I mean, as you know, he was a great tennis player. So he had kind of tennis moves on the basketball court, but plus he's a character. John is very personable. He was a great teammate, and we had, as I said, we had an iconic team. There's Mo Howard, and some of the players that we had on that team were truly, truly great.
Isn't it also amazing the careers that this team had after basketball? When you think about John Lucas coaching and all the drug rehab work he did to save a lot of folks. Gus Gerard credits John Lucas in saving his life, but also Lenny Elmore. I believe Lenny was a sports agent, was an attorney, also had a great NBA career as a player, a very solid career. It's amazing how well that team did after basketball.
Well, we had a number of players. Rich Bork went on to become a very successful dentist, and in that class, Lenny went on to Harvard Law School, and then, as you said, an attorney and broadcaster. Jack Trimble went on the television business. And of course, Lucas, who was a couple of years before us, went on to become a very successful coach, both privately and in the NBA. So it's. Lefty always says, he's the only coach in the world that's ever coached 2 Rhodes Scholars. He had one at Davidson, but he's also the only coach in the world that's coached a Harvard Law School graduate. So he feels pretty proud about that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Rhodes Scholars, you did something that I don't think any NBA player would probably do today, because the money is so enormous now that you'd probably have to play and then maybe go back and go to Oxford later on. But you made the decision to go to Oxford after college and not go to the NBA or ABA right away. Maybe talk about that.
It was a very interesting confluence of events. I was drafted by the Buffalo Braves, and remember the Virginia Squires, and there were still an ABA and NBA. But the owner of the Buffalo Braves was from my hometown of Mansfield. My father was his dentist, so not sure that another owner would have done that, given me the liberty to go to Oxford. I followed in the footsteps of Bill Bradley. When Bill went over, he actually went for 2 years to Oxford. I went over for 1 year, and my attorney came over and said, "Tom, you got to come back early. You can't stay 2 years because the ABA and MBA are going to merge. It's going to cost you a lot of money." And I said, "Look, I want to finish my Rhodes Scholarship." And I ended up working an arrangement out with Oxford so I could go back in the summers. And I finished my second year at Oxford in 3 summer terms. After MBA season, I would fly over to Oxford for 3 straight years, and I ended up getting my degree. But you're right. I don't think I would be able to make that decision today. The money would be so great. The pressure on you is so strong that I would have basically had to give up my Rhodes because they wouldn't have held it. You would be able to go back later on. I would just have to give it up.
Yeah. Well, now there's so many Americans on European rosters in basketball, but you played in Bologna, Bologna, and you played pro basketball. What was pro basketball like in Europe at that time?
Well, in Italy, and very big, we had an arena that seated about 7,500, 8,000. It was packed. It was a hugely popular sport and very good. There were a lot of great a lot of college players playing there, and a lot of pros had come back there. Italian basketball was really, really developing. My brother had played there, Jay. He was drafted by the pros after Maryland, but he went over and played in Italy, and he had the first taste of it. He said it was very good, and then I saw it. I had an American coach, Dan Peterson, and my cousin, John McMillen. It's just funny how life is, there's such serendipity to life, but my cousin was the assistant coach. And so they had recruited me to Bologna, and they were willing to allow me to fly back and forth to Oxford twice a week to play basketball in Italy. So I played like 55 games in Italy while I was going to school at Oxford, which enabled me to keep up my skills. When Bradley played over there, I think he only played in 6 or 8 games. I played 55, and that was no easy task. I flew all night. I had crazy schedules, but I ended up never missing a game. And I ended up getting my degree. So,
yeah. Well, you finally end up playing in the NBA, and I was talking to Joe Harrington about this. Joe Harrington coached George Mason near me, but he was an assistant at Maryland, coach at Maryland. And one thing he said about you is when you would guard Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you would run down and beat him to a spot, and you would get there before he even got to the key area, and that kind of, to me, encapsulated the way you played. Your game was all fakes. It was all intellect. You're always trying to use any advantage that you could get out there. What was the adjustment to the NBA in those days? It was a very tough league. It's when the leagues merged. There still wasn't that many teams, and the talent level was extremely high.
It was. I wasn't the most physically blessed player, but I did end up surviving the NBA just because I was, I could figure out how to do things in different ways. One of the ways that I oftentimes played guys, I just didn't let them get the ball. I always premised that you can't score if you don't have the ball, and so I could guard Kareem and really keep and deny him his spot, deny him the ball, and keep him 3 or 4 points under his average. That's pretty good. That's pretty good work. He also had a hard time guarding me because I could go outside and shoot. So you always had to find, ironically, players like Adrian Dantley, our Washington star. I could guard him, and he would admit that I was a pain in the ass for me to guard him, because quite frankly, I would just never let him touch the ball. And so I tried to do things that were different, just to sort of throw players off. When I was guarding Kareem, I remember Kareem would run down the court. He would just saunter down the court, go to a spot, then throw the ball and shoot a hook shot. I started meeting him at half court, and I would sort of make him kind of move around me, like I'd block him and then go 4 feet further and block him. I was just kind of messing with him. And what that throws players off, when they just have to get outside their routine. His routine was just to go straight to the spot, get the ball, and score. And so I had to disrupt that.
Yeah. Well, the mood on the court seemed like it probably was rough in the late 70s. If you go to YouTube and watch replays at that time, and I remember some of this because I was 12, 13 years old,
Yeah.
But you got Bob Lanier getting in fights. You got Daryl Dawkins' situation. You had the Rudy Tomjanovich with the unfortunate punch that he received from Kermit Washington. But it seemed like the NBA was a very tough place at the time. Did you feel like you had to be political on the court, and there was a way you had to just the mood there was kind of rough, and you had to learn how to not make waves on during the game?
No, I think it was the other way. You had to be rough. You had to be physical. You had to be, you had to do whatever it took. You could not be soft, because if you were soft, you'd get taken advantage of. It was a very tough environment. I remember my rookie year, Leonard Ray in Seattle took the ball and put his elbow right across my face, broke my nose and everything. It was tough. There was some of that gratuitous violence kind of going on, and it was just a lot less policed. I mean, I'm sure it was tough back 10 years before I played, because there were some big players, but it wasn't the same finesse that is today, although there was a lot. It just different game. Kids grow up training different. They learn to shoot the three. The three has opened up the game. I mean, it's think about it. It's not so packed in anymore. It's just a much broader landscape they play under. So it's changed the game.
Yeah. Well, you played on a very talented Knicks team with Bill Bradley, Walt Frazier, Earl Monroe. They were probably just maybe a touch past their prime. The years they won championships, but it must have been very special playing on that team.
It was playing with Bill and Phil Jackson and Earl and Walt and many other guys. We had Dean Meminger, we had Butch Beard, Spencer Haywood. There were a lot of players on that team. It was quite on paper, it looked unbelievable, but as you said, they were all a step beyond their prime. So it never was that great a team, but it was fun for me to play on it. It was my second year in the league.
Yeah. Well, one moment I remember as a kid is you had one of your greatest moments as a pro. You played for Atlanta with Hubie Brown, and you guys were playing against the Bullets, and the Bullets had won the world championship in '78. And we were coming back the next year trying to go back to back. And we're playing the Atlanta Hawks. And we were up, I believe, 3-1. And you had you guys got back into the series, and then at 3-2, you had 19 points. And it was a huge game at the Cap Center. Do you have any recollection of that game at all?
Well, I know most of my recollection is guarding Elvin, because again, I would try to front him, not let him get the ball. And it was a great series. I was kidding Bobby Dandridge the other day. I said, Bobby, I mean, if we would have taken you and that game went 7 games, we could have won the world championship. But it was a great game. That was great. I do remember that series. We had a terrific team. Tree Rollins, Dan Roundfield, Eddie Johnson, John, just a lot of great players. Armand Hill.
Yeah. Well, the next year you guys won your division. And
Right.
Hubie Brown really did a great job with that team. What kind of coach is Hubie? He had such a long career as an announcer.
Still does.
Yeah.
He's very tough. I think that his style you could get away with back then, but today it's very tough. I mean, he does not mince words. He's very outspoken to his players. I mean, he's not afraid to scream and yell at them. And, players are different today. It's just a different style. I mean, first of all, he's a great announcer. He's done a terrific job on television. He's such a knowledgeable person about basketball. It's incredible. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of basketball he's watched and his perspective. But he's very tough. He's not an easy coach to play for. And, if I were personally, I always loved coaches that were players. I love Gene Shue. I love Kevin Lockery. They were, as they call it, players coaches. But Hubie was an amazing tactician, very smart, really knew the game. And he was tough. I recall all those things.
Yeah. Well, I was very happy when you came to Washington, and you played with a team that never quite got over the hump, but we had some talent. We had what we call the Beef Brothers. We had Jeff Ruland and Rick Mahorn, and a guy that I loved. One of my favorite players as a kid was Greg Ballard, who was in the end of his career. Rest in peace. Were those years memorable for you? You're near the end of your career. You're playing with some young guys. Did you enjoy your time in Washington?
Well, I did. I think back at it because I went to see Ted Turner, who owned the Atlanta Hawks. I said, Ted, would you trade me to Washington? I wanted to run for Congress. I had bought a house in Anne Arundel near Annapolis, and I campaigned there in the summers, and I wanted to run for Congress. And lo and behold, he did it. I mean, obviously, the owner of the Bullets, Abe Poland, had to go along with it, but they traded me to Washington. And then here I am. I'm playing for Washington, back at home. And then my last season, before the season, I announced for Congress. And I play a whole year of the NBA as a candidate for Congress. No one's ever done that. They won't do it today.
Was the celebrity much different being a congressman than being a pro basketball player?
Well, I came to Congress. My class had Nancy Pelosi in it. We had Joe Kennedy. We had some pretty important luminaries. Nancy Pelosi was just a housewife when actually she ran, but the class was quite a interesting class. We had some folks who we had Fred Grandy, who was on Love Boat, so there were lots of celebrities part of the class. But when you go to Congress, it's a whole different game. I mean, there are a lot of similarities between sports and Congress. I mean, you have to, be a team player. It's a crazy lifestyle. You have to work with people from all walks of life. So that's very similar to sports. So in some respects, sports is a good preparation.
Yeah. Well, I feel like now that congressmen, they go to Washington, they vote with the leader. They have to raise money all the time. There's nothing about it that would ever attract me the way it is now. It's not that I think there's laudable goals to being in politics, but I just feel like it's hard in the way government currently is constructed to get anything done. Did you feel like at the time that you could get things done that could help your district?
Oh, absolutely. It's not always passing bills. It's getting things done, either constituents wise or, there's certain things that I did passing bills that had billion-dollar impact. Other things, you did were helping your constituents maybe solve a critical problem. So there's a lot of self-satisfaction for doing those things. And so a lot of times you're surprised how much you can get done in Congress. And I never felt that I had to party vote all the time. Sometimes they would push and pressure you to do so, and many times I resisted. Today it's probably a little more difficult, but you still have levels of independence. But it's a tough job. I mean, it's not an easy job. Playing NBA basketball is much easier job. So.
Yeah, I feel like the congressman, like for example, we have issues with gun violence, and I think the congressman, most people know what we have to do, but it's just very hard in this environment to get anything done. So what are you to do how are things going to change? Because I think people go to Congress to do good things, and they don't like what's going on. They want to change things for the positive, but there's an inertia to government that makes it hard for anything to ever get done.
Well, there's a difference between the Senate and the House. When the House flips Democrat, you get a lot of bills passed. The problem with the Senate is the state the size of Delaware has the same senatorial power as the state the size of California. Our founding fathers never expected California or one state to have 60, 70 million people. They never expected that so much of America would live in one state. So it has skewed the Senate from that standpoint. So the House works very representatively, the Senate less so, and that's been a problem. And I don't think our founding fathers, they always viewed the Senate as a cooling off place. I don't think they viewed it as obstructionist, which it has become today.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you stayed in politics, or you've been in and out of politics in terms of presidential commissions. You worked with like FloJo, who her gold medals weren't taken away from her, but you're able to work in with the president and commissions. Was that work rewarding for you? Did you feel like you were able to make an impact?
Yes, I was on the council on physical fitness when I was in high school, and then I chaired Senator Clinton with FloJo. It's a wonderful commission. I ended up spending a lot of time with President Clinton, so it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed that very much. And as you know, I've been on the Board of Regents previously for 7 years, and now I'm a new member, and that's a very high appointment for the state of Maryland. You really are trying to run that system, which has 13 institutions in it. So that's a big job too. So I do enjoy it. It's a lot of work, but it's also fulfilling work, which I've appreciated.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned earlier about Lead1. The job you represent athletic directors at the football subdivision. like a football bowl subdivision,
Yes.
and which is the old 1AA, as I mentioned before. Tell us a little bit about your work with that group.
Well, we work on all the policy issues in college sports. We push the NCAA in some things, whether it's transfer portals or NIL or treating student athletes as employees. There's so many issues that we grapple with, and we try to assemble the voices of our ADs in our schools to see where they're coming from. College sports is very fragmented. You have the conferences. It's kind of a very feudal system because you have sort of the weak NCAA and strong conferences, and you're trying to run an enterprise which is multi-billion dollars. I mean, college sports is a $15 billion plus enterprise, and it is very feudal. I think it's the best way to express it because football has its own power block and its own championship. Basketball has its. The conferences are their fiefdoms, and so it's hard to get things done. And so we try to play a role in moving the ball forward.
Yeah. So you had an incredible career. You did things that most of us dream about doing. You played professional sports. You played obviously college at the highest level. You got into politics. You played overseas. You worked overseas. Rhodes Scholar. You had a great professional career, even outside of politics. Is there anything left that you'd like to accomplish? I mean, you've done it. You've done just about it all.
Well, people have said that I have multiple career disorder. I can't figure out what I want to do. The one job that I think is probably the best job that I've often dreamed about doing is being a governor. I think governor would be a great job because it's the place in America where you can really make an impact, and it's a place where good old politics plays a lot of role in it. So I end up supporting a lot of governors. We have a great new governor, Maryland, Wes Moore, and I'm tickled pink about the job he's doing, and glad to help him. So I can live kind of viscerally through him. But that's one thing I've always enjoyed doing. I've been CEO of $100 million companies. I've done a lot of things in the entrepreneurial world. I've been on the Olympics. I played NBA basketball. I've been a congressman. So I've been in a lot of different areas, but that's one area that I probably would wish I had done something like that. But you can only do so many things. Life doesn't give it all to you, but you have to pick and choose. And I have no regrets.
Yeah, I think at one point you were pre-med. Could you imagine you were a doctor and spent the last 50 years practicing medicine or dentistry like your own father?
No, my wife would have said that would have been my biggest mistake. She's a doctor, by the way, so she's an emergency room doctor. But no, I don't think that would have been the right calling for me. But life has a way of working out, and so I'm having fun in working in this college sports arena right now.
Yeah. Well, look, Tom. I really appreciate you taking time to talk to me. Anyone who grew up in the Washington area, the time I grew up, you were an icon. You did it all. You're a great player. I don't think people realize what a great player you were, but folks that were watching basketball in the mid 70s and saw those Maryland teams, the impact that you and your partner Lynn Elmore had was amazing. So I still remember those days. So look, I really appreciate you doing this. It was an honor for me to talk to you.
Well, it's an honor to be with you, and I hope the hook shot comes back. I used to shoot a lot of hook shots, but they seems to be a lost art these days. But it's fun to be with you, Julian. Thank you.
Well, to talk about lost art, the thing that you did almost better than anyone, you had the soft shot off the glass. That is really lost on today's players. The glass is only used for layups, and you had a 15-footer off the glass that you would use maybe a pump fake or two, and that was one of your moves.
Yeah, it's just it's a different game today. If you grow up playing the game today, you'd play it a lot differently than we played it, and the 3-point shots changed basketball dramatically. But as they say, the world goes on. So
yeah, we have to adapt or die, right?
So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, again, Tom, it's been great talking.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, hopefully we can keep in touch.
Thank you.